In the beginning, there existed only the spirit world of Po, where there was no light, no heaven, no earth. And the gods Kani, Ku, and Lono came out of the darkness, and they created 3 heavens in which to dwell, the uppermost for Kani, the next below for Ku, and the lowest for Lono. Then they formed the earth to lay their feet on, and called it the Great Earth of Kani, and made the waters of the ocean salt. Kani created the sun, the moon, and the stars, and placed them in the empty spaces between heaven and earth. And the great gods collected clay from all corners of the earth, and fashioned man in the image of Kani, and gave him breath and life. And the descendants of the great gods and their lesser spirits dwelt with men on earth, in the islands we call Hawaii. The Hawaiian Islands have been born of fire from beneath the sea during the past 130 million years. At that distant time when dinosaurs first evolved monsters like Tyrannosaurus, a hot spot beneath the Earth's crust thrust the first volcano to the surface. Over the millennia, the seafloor of the North Pacific has been sliding imperceptibly towards the coast of Asia, while the hotspot remained in place, periodically punching out new volcanoes on the ocean floor, forging new islands. As it passed over the hotspot, each volcano has waxed and waned in size and strength, but always was doomed to eventual extinction. In the peak of vigor, the Hawaiian volcanoes surpass in size any other volcano on the face of the earth. Mightiest of all, the 13,800-foot Mauna Kea rises from the seafloor 50 miles distant to its summit, a vertical height of more than 6 miles, making it by far the biggest mountain on Earth. As shield volcanoes mature, the magma chamber lying beneath the summit is emptied through fissure eruptions on the volcano's flank, and the summit collapses on itself to form deep calderas, the fiery cauldron in which frequent eruptions brew. Today, the Hawaiian Islands contain 132 islands, reefs, and shoals stretching from the tiny and extinct Kure Island in the northwest, more than 1,500 miles to the active volcanoes of the newest and biggest island, Hawaii. Plants and animals transported to Hawaii had to span several thousand miles of ocean, and those which most easily achieved it were carried on the wind. Lichens and ferns, some of the hardiest plants of all, dropped out of the upper atmosphere to find Spartan sustenance on the fresh lava wastelands. Eggs and larvae swept up in the ocean currents from the western Pacific quickly colonized the island's submarine scapes, creating the foundations for the wealth of life we find today. As volcanoes built the islands higher, they altered the weather. The moist trade winds, driven upwards against the mountainsides, condensed to form rain in the highlands, bringing new conditions to the Hawaiian Islands. Beach plants that had colonized the dry and barren lava slopes resettled to higher ground, where the rain encouraged a riot of growth, and with it, a struggle for sunlight. New species of plants and animals are still colonizing Hawaii, some even evolving into unique forms like the rare nene geese. Mount Wa'ali'ali, the summit of Kauai and the remaining vestige of a once giant volcano, is deluged by as much as 600 inches of rainfall a year, a record 50 feet, making it one of the wettest spots on Earth. On the summit of the highest volcanoes, where rainfall turns to ice, plants and animals have adapted to an alpine environment. Above 6,000 feet, the trade winds have lost most of their moisture, and the mountain above is like a frozen desert. Life must endure the challenges of damaging extremes, from the fierce heat of the noonday sun and its perilous blast of ultraviolet rays, to temperatures which may sink to below freezing at night. Life adapted to such extremes is hardy, resilient, indomitable, long-lived. Erosion along a fault line in the highlands of Kauai channeled many streams together to etch out the 4,000-foot-deep Waimea Canyon. unremitting erosion over the eons has worn down the oldest of the northwestern volcanoes, known as the Leeward Islands, from proud peaks which may once have been as grand as Mauna Kea. Ground of fragments of their former selves, the 30-island complexes of the Leewards now cover less than 6 square miles. Yet these islands are the refuge for a wealth of rare and endangered life. Hawaiian monk seals are an endangered breed that once were also plentiful in the Caribbean and Mediterranean. Seals and seabirds were among the first forms of animal life to colonize the Hawaiian Islands, and it is mostly to the Leeward group that they return each year to reproduce. During the summer season, the islands are strewn with the nest scrapes of countless thousands of sooty terns. Laysan and black-footed albatross breed in their millions during winter months and rear their chicks to fledge by the end of summer. Frigate birds, the tyrants of seabird colonies, live by pirating food from their less aggressive neighbors. While most of these birds raise only one chick each year, nonetheless the ocean must provide hundreds of tons of fish and squid each day to the breeding colonies. Despite their tiny size, even fairy tern chicks have prodigious appetites. It was for islands such as these that the Polynesians were searching when they happened on the far greater prize of the Big Islands in the Windward Group more than 1,400 years ago. Nobody knows exactly when they came or who they were, but suddenly they were here. Long before the Vikings made their great voyages in the North Atlantic, the Polynesians were making regular inter-island crossings of thousands of miles. Evidence indicates that they came from the Marquesas Islands, some 2,500 miles distant to the south. By this time, the Hawaiian Islands had developed their present configuration and harbored a rich complement of plants and animals, many of which were unique to the islands. Most notable by their absence were lizards, frogs, and such pests as mosquitoes and fleas. The first wave of colonists brought many domestic plants, dogs, hogs, chickens, and of course, their gods. Until people first came to Hawaii, legend has it that only spirits dwelt in the islands. When the Polynesians arrived, they peopled the land and populated the valleys and mountains with their gods. They were animists. Their gods were part of the natural world and might be unseen spirits or be manifested in the clouds or the waves, a man, a stone, or a tree. All life sprang from the gods and is therefore filled with spirit force. Migrating birds were viewed as likely gods or spirit beings, carrying messages between the islands. Fragrant plants and flowers were close to the gods, and colors were indications of divine rank. Yellow was sacred to the great god Kani. Red birds and red flowers were sacrosanct and might only be worn by those of noble birth. Child of Pele, the great fire goddess, Kuka'ohialaka is of the fragrant foliage of the mountains, the ginger, the maile, the ilima. Laka is worshipped in the hula, to which the ohia is also sacred. Greatest of the great gods was Kani, father of all life, provider of sunlight, fresh water, and the living things of the natural world. Kani, procreator of life and ancestor of men, was father of the taro plant. In Hawaiian legend, Kani's firstborn was a malformed child who died and was buried, where later it became the first taro plant. Man, the second child of Kani, became Taro's little brother. Kanaloa was lord of the oceans, god of the octopus, healer of those under sorcerer spells. Ku, the male generating power, was god of war, demander of human sacrifice. The great god Lono was the god of peace, the god of fertility, farming, and rain clouds. Lono had many earthly forms. He could appear as a cloud, live as a kukui tree, or take on the form of a hog. And he could cross between islands as a fish. And so the gods proliferated across the islands as the people spread until there were 50 subsidiary gods to each of the 4 great gods, and to each of the 50 another 50, spreading like the roots of a tree. And every activity and every family had their own god, and every creature its own. And the gods left their mark on the landscapes of Hawaii, for many were the legends about their exploits. Haleakala, house of the sun. Here the demigod Maui lassoed the sun to slow it down so that his mother might dry her tapa cloth. Pele traveled from island to island in her search for fire and is said to have dug many holes until at last she found fire in the pit of Halimau, where she is said to dwell today. To the ancient Hawaiians, the islands were alive with gods, waiting in the trees, watching from the rocks, judging the acts of mortals. It is said that what had no name the Hawaiians didn't use, for they were island people, their world limited by the sea around them, the land conserved and divided, the resources nurtured, because plants and animals were the wards of gods, or gods themselves. The planters did not own the land, but earned the right to work it by making it productive. To own water rights was to be wealthy in ancient Hawaiian times. It was even the same word. With water, the planter could raise abundant taro, trade it for fish, or with the people of the highlands for kukui nut oil or berries. Taro, a lily, and imported with the new Hawaiians, was cultivated in fields called loi, which, like rice fields, were terraced and flooded. The water carefully conserved on its passage from the highlands by sophisticated irrigation systems. Irrigation was the key to the success of the terraced taro loi. Many of the greatest feats of engineering in Hawaii were said to have been performed by the little people, the menehune. It was the menehune who were alleged to build many of the great canals. In legend, all the great feats of the menehune were performed by night. They were a benevolent people, small in stature and living in caves during the daytime, were rarely seen. And it was the menehune who were called on to build the great fish ponds along the coasts. Some, like the Alakoko fish pond of Kauai, were never finished. Apparently, dawn arrived before the menehune had completed their great work. In the great census taken in the early 1800s, of the 2,000 people living in Kauai's Wainiha Valley, 65 were registered as menehune. In these ancient times, the land was divided into political units called ahupuaha, like slices of pie that swept down from the highlands to the ocean. The ruling class, the ali'i, ruled each area by the system of kapu. By their claimed close association with the gods, the ali'i could make their will law, kapu, through the word of the gods. Each year, the taxes would be collected from the commoners by the ali'i during the feast of the Makahiki, a feast celebrated in honor of the great god Lono. Lono, god of rain, god of peace, god of the clouds. In legend, he was a chief who slew his wife in a fit of jealous rage and then repented. In penance for this deed, he wandered the islands, challenging any man he met to wrestle with him. In the end, he built a great canoe in which he set sail on a voyage, vowing to return on a floating island covered with coconuts and swarming with wild fowl and hogs. On January 17, 1778, 2 ships under the command of Captain James Cook first anchored off Kauai. He stayed for only 2 weeks and did not return to the islands for almost a year. By coincidence, Cook arrived in the islands on both occasions at the peak of the Makahiki festival. The priests took this as a sign that the great god Lono had returned from his travels. Captain Cook was honored, plied with food, and given the gift of a magnificent feather cape worthy of a god. In just a few weeks, when his ships were damaged by a storm, the Hawaiians began to doubt this new incarnation of Lono. 2 days later, when one of his cutters was stolen, Cook and 4 Marines were killed on shore while trying to take the High Chief hostage. Cook's visit marked the first recorded encounter between Hawaiians and Westerners. Now the insular island paradise had finally been shattered, and at once new forces began to exert their influence. In little more than 15 years, almost all of Hawaii had been brought under the rule of one warlord, King Kamehameha, who used Western technology to conquer his rivals. By the early 1820s, the first Protestant missionaries arrived from New England. The Westerners who spurned Hawaiian taboo were left unpunished. Clearly, their god was stronger. Within 30 years, the ali'i had converted to Christianity, as the old religion and its gods were finally abandoned in limbo. The 1820s also brought the first whaling vessels to Hawaiian ports from where they could plunder the Pacific stocks. During the peak, as many as 500 whaling vessels a year would put in at Honolulu or Lahaina, leaving behind the annual bounty of more than $1 million. It was a boom time in which Lahaina, now capital of all Hawaii, was transformed. Lahaina has a wealth of historic monuments from this time. The Lahaina Luna Seminary became the first school and is one of the oldest west of the Rocky Mountains. And the prison, an unwelcome hostelry for many sailors. The Baldwin House was built by one of the first missionary families. With the production of petroleum in the United States, the whaling era ended and a new industry swiftly took its place. Sugarcane, a crop once raised as a subsidiary by the Hawaiian planter, now dominated agriculture. Burned before harvest, the cane was transported from fields to the factory by steam locomotives, some of which are still in operation. Native Hawaiians, whose culture and society only gave them stewardship over the land, were quickly disinherited by the waves of new land-hungry immigrants. By the turn of the century, the Hawaiian Islands had been annexed by the United States and Queen Liliuokalani deposed. A newly elected democratic government stood in its place, with Sanford B. Dole as president. The Iolani Palace, built in 1882 by the last Hawaiian king, became the new government headquarters. In the early 1900s, many taro loi were absorbed into a new industry which, during its height, would supply the world with 75% of its pineapples. By the early 1940s, Japanese expansion throughout Asia had set the stage for the event that would thrust the Hawaiian Islands irrevocably into the 20th century. The surprise raid on Pearl Harbor was a devastating blow to U.S. naval power in the Pacific. However brilliantly planned and executed, the Japanese attack suffered from one fatal flaw, for the Pearl Harbor raid had, in the words of General Yamamoto, awakened a sleeping giant and filled him with a terrible resolve. The new Hawaiian immigrants from all ethnic backgrounds flocked to the Stars and Stripes. Japanese Americans formed the 442nd Infantry Division, becoming the most highly decorated unit in the American Army. In the 2 centuries since Captain Cook first sighted Hawaii, the islands have been transformed. People from nations across the globe have joined the descendants of the Polynesian settlers to build a new and stronger Hawaii. Hawaii is where the world takes a break. Even in our play, we are reminded of old Hawaii. The world learned surfing from Hawaiians who rode the waves on boards carved from koa trees, centuries before the islands were discovered by Westerners. "38 freewheeling miles take cyclists from the summit of 10,000-foot Mount Haleakala to sea level on one of the longest downhill rides on Earth. clear waters of the Central Pacific drift through the Hawaiian Islands, bringing myriad life forms to Hawaii's coral gardens. Nearly 600 species of fishes are found in Hawaiian waters, and 1/3 of these occur nowhere else on Earth. A porcupine fish defends itself by inflating its stomach with water, presenting an uninviting mouthful to any would-be predator. White-tip reef sharks find shelter for much of the day in a deep-water cave. Like many sharks, they evoke unnecessary fear, as these are docile and relatively harmless. Schools of reef fish can be quickly attracted by food, and even to feed from the hand. Slim lemon butterfly fishes and blue-lined snappers will compete vigorously for handouts. Among the most maligned of reef animals are moray eels, yet if left unmolested, they rarely, if ever, attack. In fact, moray eels are easily tamed in the wild, like this one, called Jaws, and form friendly alliances with certain divers. Giant lava tubes, formed when the arteries of molten magma drained dry, have created some spectacular caves. Only a few have ever been explored. Symbol of peace and freedom, the humpback whales are also symbolic of old Hawaii. Since prehistory, the North Pacific humpback whales have made Hawaii their home each winter, migrating back from frigid Alaskan waters as the bounty of summer waned to give birth to their calves. Then for more than a century, they were relentlessly pursued, slaughtered in their thousands, and brought to the verge of extinction. In them, as in the Hawaiian culture, we realize now that we almost lost the most priceless part of our heritage. For more than 20 years, the humpbacks have been protected worldwide, and like the remnants of the lost people, their strength and numbers gather in a newfound freedom. The humpback whales return to Hawaii each year and sing fresh refrains to the songs of the year before, a society that has weathered the storms of millennia. To the world at large, the Hawaiian Islands have become a symbol of paradise, a place of refuge from reality. Here we seek to reach out and touch our roots, as if to anoint ourselves with the balm of innocence we once had and now have lost. The Hawaiian Islands have been steeped in the beliefs of an ancient people who regarded their natural world with awe and wonder, and who nurtured the ancestral knowledge of their share in paradise. For here, in the highlands and forests, the deserts and ocean, one may believe that the spirits of the gods still walk the earth.